Shaper 2 Exercise 1. They often say people look like ants when seen from a great height. I lean forward a little in my seat and look out of the window. Our flight to Peru has yet to reach cruising altitude. Below us, I can just about make out roads, houses and fields, cows in a pasture, here and there a village, and a city in the far distance. It's not a bad comparison, I think. Everything I can see from up here is something I have encountered in my research on ants. Fixed roads, spectacular buildings, agriculture, livestock farming. I let myself sink back into my seat. The parallels don't stop there, if you think about it. Ants live in cities, just like people. In times of peace, they go about their work, sharing the labor fairly. Each has a job, from the wet nurses in the nursery to the architects, construction workers, and housekeepers in the nest, to the hunters and gatherers, who ensure that everyone is fed. But peace does not last forever, even among ants. Neighbors fight over the borders to their territory and wage bitter wars on one another. Shaper 2 Exercise 2. Infants' abilities to track patterns were demonstrated in a series of landmark studies that first appeared in 1996. The studies focused on how infants identified artificial spoken words embedded in much larger strings of spoken syllables. When infants hear a string of syllables, such as po ta tu, repeatedly occurring, do they start to see that string as somehow special and cohering as a unit, namely potato? They do so easily. In fact, infants under 6 months can learn new artificial words in under 2 minutes. They are artificial to make sure infants don't already have experience with them as words. In the studies, infants listen to much longer strings of syllables in which certain artificial words, such as bidaku, repeatedly occur amid other non-repeating random strings of syllables. No other cues to repeating 3-syllable words are present, such as intonation, special stress, or pauses. Based solely on repeated co-occurrences, infants reliably came to expect such sequences to occur again in the future in comparison to other completely novel 3-syllable sequences for which they showed no such expectations. Shaper 2 Exercise 3. Working with the Department of Commerce, NASA satellites have provided orbital observations that have enabled the understanding of climate change. Satellites track weather patterns and measure the effectiveness of farming methods and innovations in agriculture, which have helped to feed millions more than we could have dreamed possible before the space age. The collection and distribution of fresh water, rapidly becoming one of this century's most valuable resources, is monitored globally. Aquaculture data tracking stocks of fish and modeling how to best utilize and maintain a healthy supply of this important food source is generated from space-based observations. The identification of mineral resources is increasingly performed via satellite imagery. Satellites are also a part of the global traffic control system for aircraft. Even ground transport trucks, trains, and the like is monitored from orbit. In short, much of what drives modern civilization is affected, and in most cases improved, by the use of data obtained from satellites. Shaper 2 Exercise 4. Wondering goes beyond merely being curious. Building on prior knowledge and some sense of major causal and spatial patterns, we entertain rough sketches of possibilities or interpretations and strive to learn which is more accurate and how it is filled out. To marvel at something is also linked to wondering. While marvels and wonders often refer to awe-evoking things, when children engage in wonder, they do much more than simply sit in a state of passive reverential awe. Their awe is better described by the naturalist Rachel Carson, a joyous marveling at how an insight has revealed an enormous new expanse of possible patterns to explore. It is not the dumbstruck, potentially fear-laden sense of awe experienced by adults. Almost a century ago, in an isolated region of Papua New Guinea, the anthropologist Margaret Mead observed that, when children were asked to explain why a canoe tied to a tree drifted away overnight, they offered explanations of how the rocking boat gradually loosened up the knot. In contrast, many adults invoked spirits, moral crimes, and supernatural interventions. When we see young children's wonder as filled with supernatural agency, we impose the encultured interpretations of adults. Chapter 2 Exercise 5. One couple created a very personal way to commemorate their participation in space missions. In the early 1960s, Toni Foster and her husband, Robert L. Bob Foster, an engineer who worked for McDonnell Aviation, the contractor that built NASA's Mercury and Gemini space capsules, had a tradition. Whenever Bob completed a project, he gave Toni a new charm for her charm bracelet. These space-themed tokens celebrated the end of significant professional projects and offered a gift to make up for being away so much during intense periods of work. The charms also recognized how she contributed to his career by taking care of their children and home, allowing him to spend time away as chief engineer on Project Mercury and operations manager on Project Gemini. Although the bracelet is now missing its clasp and is too short to be worn, the charms hanging from the delicate gold links tell an important story about the people who made human spaceflight happen. Chapter 2 Exercise 6. Your anxiety most likely has genetic roots. For example, many people that I treat at my center tend to have a family history of phobias, panic attack struggles, or obsessive-compulsive disorder. The genetic connection can be close and obvious, like a parent, or less direct, like a second aunt or a great-grandfather. To put it simply, this means that those with anxious wiring tend to be more likely to suffer from potential anxiety issues than those without. However, this inclination for developing an anxiety issue by no means suggests that it's a foregone conclusion. It just means the table has been set, should you take certain actions to sit down and eat. This is similar in some way to someone with a genetic predisposition toward alcohol abuse. Even though the pull might be strong, you only become an alcoholic once you abuse alcohol. 2 Gang Exercise 7. Although we think of speech as consisting of separate phonemes, it is easy to demonstrate that it doesn't. Think of the common activity in which a Muppet, or person, models sounding out a simple word. Letters appear on the screen and the Muppet says the sounds associated with them, one at a time, B, A, T, gradually decreasing the pauses between them. Sometimes the letters are displayed far apart on the screen and gradually brought closer together as a visual cue. The sounds do not fuse into bat, no matter how rapidly in succession they are spoken, because it does not consist of 3 separate segments. A discontinuity always occurs at the very end when the rapidly but separately pronounced phonemes are followed by the word pronounced as a whole. How to get from one to the other, the Muppet does not say. The activity is useful because the child learns about letters and their sounds. It encourages the fiction that words consist of separate segments even as it demonstrates that they do not.